Something that needs to be understood is that we're never going to see a bill out of Congress that's actually going to do anything good anytime soon. This is Digital Drive here on Hot News Talk Radio, AM 1240, and we're always here at hotnewstalkradio.com. There's a new bill here that has been introduced that's looking to be, well, making warrantless cell phone surveillance illegal, which is kind of redundant because it's already illegal. It's warrantless cell phone surveillance with a Stingray device. Thus, it is illegal, right? I mean, you'd think, right? Well, the use of stingrays that capture data about cell phone calls has become increasingly controversial, but law enforcement agencies continue to embrace the devices. Just last week, IRS Director John Koskinen was questioning the U.S. Senate about his agency's acquisition of a stingray for its criminal investigations. Now, what does the IRS need with a stingray device would be my question. Well, IRS would reply, well, you know, there's a lot of fugitives out there who are using cell phones to launder money or something. So we need to warrantlessly search them in order to make sure that they are not actually laundering money. Now, that sounds all well and good, but it's also kind of illegal because there's no warrant involved there. In fact, I have it right in front of me here. Hold on. Constitution. I stole it, actually. I stole the Constitution and the Declaration, but they're not going to miss it. They don't use it anyway. Fourth Amendment. There we go. Shall be secure in their effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrant shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. Very clear, isn't it? So if there's no warrant, there's no oath or affirmation, there's no affidavit, then why is there a search? There's a procedure in place already to make sure that you can search someone's cell phone. I mean, there is a procedure there. Just go through that procedure and we're all hunky-dory. There's no problem. But probably not going to do that because that means actually following the law. And also, it's very inconvenient. People wonder, what's the motive? We talk about how bad government being so bad. The motive is simply control. That's what the motive is most likely going to be, is always going to be, is what it just is. It's control. It's about control. And if government's not monopolizing everything, then it may as well not even exist, because in the way it's structured now it necessitates monopoly. It really does, because it needs money, it needs power, it just is. And there's a lot of human greed involved there too. Now, this happens with every state. And we've talked about this before. This happens with every state system. They always degrade. That just is how it is. And I'm not saying that no state should ever exist, although I totally am. What I'm saying more is that states exist and states degrade, and that's just nature. That is how it is. Like trees grow and die naturally. Well, so do states. So do governments. They grow and they die naturally. And when they're dead, they're very, very sick. And ours is quite sick right now, I got to say. And it's not just us. I'm not just beating up on the U.S., good old U.S. of A., good old Uncle Sam. I'm not just beating up on the U.S. Look at Germany right now. It's not doing too great. Lots of other, Nordic, North European countries are not doing so great. Russia is certainly not doing wonderfully, although its economy is doing better than it was before. China really is the only state that I'm seeing that is actually seeing some growth for now. The for now being the area where we should be pushing a lot of emphasis. There's quite a bit of instability there actually right now. So all states that are presently existing are sort of going downhill, and that's not like the end of the world scenario. That just is how it is. We've gone through, as humans, we've gone through much worse things before, and we're probably going to go through much worse things going forward too. Right now, the collapse of the U.S. state would not be the worst thing to ever happen to humanity ever. It's not the Black Death. It's not the Bolshevik Revolution. It's not World War I. It's not the Civil War. It's not as bad as we might think it to be, because we need something to beat up on, right? I'm not sure if conservative would be the right way to describe me. Honestly, I'm more anarchistic. I don't like any particular political leaning. My political leaning is that we should do away with politics anyway. But I know and I recognize that's very unrealistic for an expectation. That's entirely unrealistic. There's always going to be a state. So we may as well restrain it as much as we can while it's going to exist, because it is, I can't do anything about it. I'm not the one making the decisions. In fact, there isn't a one making any decision except for the Almighty, obviously. But if we're talking about making decisions, right, there's not any unified body that makes decisions in this world. We like to think that there's this one guy we can blame for everything. And it really doesn't work that way. There may be a committee, right, a Soviet of a lot of different people, but there's not one guy you can point at and say, well, that guy is doing everything that's bad. It doesn't work that way. Like, even the president's a scapegoat most of the time. We say, look at Obama. Look what Obama's doing. And what's Obama doing? It's signing papers, you know? Like, Obama's not sending troops anywhere. Obama doesn't have power to do that anyway. And even if he did, popular opinion would vastly sway against him if he decided to say a second surge in Iraq. That would be political suicide. Not that he cares. It's the end of his term anyway. But you get my point, right? Like, we like to think that there is some sort of unified body that makes all the determinations in the world. And really, it's not. There's a lot of strife going on in the world simply because not everyone's going to cooperate. And that's actually kind of good that not everyone's cooperating, because it depends on your view, right? If everyone cooperated, say, communist, then I don't want to be communist, so I wouldn't cooperate. So then not everyone would be cooperating. Or if everyone cooperated and said, we are all going to be capitalist, then that wouldn't be so great either, because then there'd be the one guy who said, I don't want to be capitalist, I want to be anything else, and then strife would begin. So you can see where it's not a good idea to have all governments in agreement. It's actually not great, believe it or not. Kind of an odd situation. Well, anyway, I don't know how we got from warrantless cell phone spying to talking about how the world works, but oh well. The use of stingrays, by the way, is something that we've talked about pretty extensively, and don't feel like you've missed anything. Don't worry. We'll go over it again. Stingrays are brand names, actually. It's kind of like Kleenex for tissues. Like, we always say tissues, or we always say Kleenex, even when we're talking about puffs. Just is what it is. But what we've got now is stingray devices, which are put out by the Harris Corporation, a big multi-billion-dollar company, I'm sure, that puts out mainly broadcast software, hardware. So, like, your radio station that you're listening to, excluding this one, probably uses stuff from the Harris Corporation. That just is how it is. Again, it's a big company. And a big company like Harris Corporation has a lot of capital to spend on special projects. One of those special projects was this surveillance device, which it marketed out and leased. They don't own it. They lease or rent to law enforcement agencies under contract. Now, the contract is also a non-disclosure agreement, NDA. So these law enforcement agencies which get these devices are technically not legally supposed to talk about it. Now, I say legally very loosely, because legally they have a responsibility to talk about it, but under the NDA, they can't. So it's kind of a weird situation. But these devices, what they do is actually very dastardly. What they do is they spy on cell phones. It acts as sort of a middleman between you and the cell phone tower. And it pretends to be a cell phone tower, actually, and your phone will connect to it thinking that it is, in fact, a cell phone tower, and send all this information to it that then gets relayed to the cell phone tower, the actual cell phone tower. But before that happens, there's a lot of collection that goes on. And this is not for just one cell phone. It's any cell phone that's within the range of this particular device. So we could be talking about potentially thousands of people, especially if there's one, say, downtown, like there most likely was when the vice president visited. Remember that when the vice president came down here to our city, Chattanooga. We're in Hickson. We're a Hickson station, but we identify with Chattanooga too. And we were covering that situation when it was happening. When the vice president came down, there were a few other military people, but the vice president was the most noteworthy one, I suppose. When the vice president came down to give that speech about the Fallen Five, I got word, now I can't confirm this, but I got reports that there were stingray devices in Chattanooga. Now, the only way that works is if the feds use it, because feds claim to have interstate border jurisdiction over these things. So the local law enforcement doesn't have to report that, yes, we used a stingray device. It could be U.S. Marshals that use a stingray device as well, which does not get reported to the local media because it's not technically a local thing. So that's how that happens. And most likely, this stingray device was picking up the communications of everyone in the area looking for buzz phrases or looking for key phrases like, say, gun, bomb, whatever. It's like the old thing where if you use the phrase blow up the White House in an email, you're probably going to get a visit. from the powers that be. FBI probably, or even Secret Service might come to your house or investigate you anyway. Not that you should ever blow up the White House. That's a terrible thing to do. Lots of history there. But that's a phrase which would be used and would be looked at if you sent that in an email, just as an example. And that's been the big thing, is that if you ever say that, you're probably going to get a visit from the Secret Service. I don't know how true that is, but I do know that they use key phrases that they look for. So Stingray devices would do the same thing, except for cell phone communications, not necessarily internet communications. Internet communications are easy to track, but cell phones, not so much. You have to get a separate device to do that. Today, Representative Jason Chaffetz, who's a Republican from Utah, has said that he will introduce a bill which would actually criminalize any use of a stingray without a warrant. He provided a draft copy of the bill to the Washington Examiner, which reports that the violations would be punishable by a fine and up to 10 years in prison. So that seems pretty good, right? Well, of course, like any other bill which would seemingly criminalize warrantless spying, there are exceptions, just as there always are. There's actually a bill in Tennessee that does make it illegal to use a stingray device without a warrant. Problem is, and this is a Tennessee law, problem is there are extenuating circumstances which are cited, which could be really anything. So the whole bill doesn't really matter because it cites something very vague that has no definition, like extenuating circumstances or extreme circumstances or whatever. It doesn't really, it's just a phrase that we'll throw out there so we can get exception to do anything we want at any time. It's ridiculous, but get used to it. If you look into these things like I do, not to put myself on a pedestal, but if you look into things like I do, laws and such, you'll notice that almost every law that goes on the books nowadays has some exception to it that would allow state, corporation, whatever, to do this thing which is blatantly illegal so long as there's exceptional circumstances, which have no definition, so you could just do them whenever. It's ridiculous. And it sounds, I almost hate talking about it because it sounds so crazy tinfoil conspiracy theory. But I mean, if you read the law, it's there. It sounds nuts, but Liberties Union has identified about 57 agencies which own stingrays or similar devices in 22 states and the District of Columbia. Now, as far as I can confirm right now, Tennessee doesn't have any device. Now, according to ACLU map, actually does own a stingray device. Now, that's rather troubling because I live in Georgia. I'm a very proud Georgian. I'm not gonna cut your head off if you're a Tennessean, but I like my state, and it's just, it bugs me that this would happen where I live. You know, I don't actually live near Tennessee or Georgia Tech campus, but it's in my state still, and that feels like my backyard, and I hate that. It makes me mad, honestly. So the abuse of stingrays, says Chavetz, and other cell site simulators by individuals, including law enforcement, would enable gross violations of privacy, as we said in his bill. The fact that law enforcement agencies and non-law enforcement agencies like the IRS, which is not a law enforcement agency, by the way, IRS has no business doing law enforcement whatsoever. All the IRS does is just look at internal revenue. It's a tax agency. It's all it does. Now, it does a lot more than that, but it's all it's supposed to do. And enforcement is not one of those things. You're not going to have IRS agents kicking down your door, most likely. IRS would get a warrant or would ask the FBI most likely to arrest you should there be any issue, say non-paid taxes, whatever. So it's just stupid. Stingray is operated by imitating a cell phone, cell site, but we know that already. Under Senate questioning last week, Koskinen emphasized, this is the guy who runs the IRS, emphasized that his agency already gets a warrant when it uses the device, saying it does not allow you to overhear voice communications, he added. You may pick up texting. Koskinen was unable to provide the number of times that stingrays have been used by the IRS, but he said that he would provide answers in writing within 30 days. Chavetz and other House Republicans have already had serious beef with IRS Chief Koskinen. They're seeking to impeach him, actually, for his agency's targeting of conservative groups, which sought tax exemptions. That's the whole deal with Lois Lerner you may have heard about from a few years ago that's still spilling over now. Were stingray devices used in this unfair targeting of Tea Party conservative groups? We don't know yet. We'll have to wait for reports, but I would not be surprised. Now, note what Koskinen says there. He says that voice communications are not captured. That's interesting to note. I don't know if that's true or not. I would say it probably is, because getting voice data like that, constantly recording voice data like that seems unrealistic. Certainly it could happen, But it seems like the IRS would not be particularly interested in voice communications nearly as much as text communications, because recording a phone call probably has some sort of legal some sort of legal thing going on that's not the same as texting. Even though it's communications just the same, there's probably some wiretapping law that wouldn't allow the IRS to actually listen to your communications in real time. There's probably something going on like that. Now, the IRS claims to get a warrant every time. That is significant, and I don't have as much of a problem with it if the IRS does indeed get a warrant. Problem is, of course, I'm vehemently against the IRS. So another conundrum. I hate the IRS. It's any as I'm concerned. And so the IRS really doing anything is wrong as far as I'm concerned. I've said that like 4 times now. It's a bad situation because it doesn't work. It's never worked that way. It's never going to work that way. And it never has worked that way. Voting the right guy in is just going to make your situation worse or temporarily better, or maybe a nice ride with the same way that it is right now. I mean, really, you think voting in Trump is going to fix all our problems? It's not. And you'd have to get 200 years of voting in the right guys every single time for 200 years in Congress and, House and Senate and presidency, and hope that they appoint the right guys to all the cabinets, and hope that they have the right Speaker of the House, and hope that they have the right this guy for that committee. I hope they have all the right people on the House Select Committee on assassinations or whatever they do, and which actually was a thing, and hope that everything lines up perfectly for about 200 years, and then maybe voting the right guys in would work. But short term, it doesn't work that way. What, you think Trump is going to overthrow all these different institutions, which we don't like? He's going to sign Executive Order 0027 that's going to get rid of the IRS? It doesn't work that way. Trump has no interest in getting rid of the IRS. Neither do any of the other candidates. They may claim they do, but they don't even have the power to anyway. So it's ridiculous to think that if I vote in the right guy, he's going to fix it, because it don't work that way. It never has. It never will. And it's not going to now. So we think that, well, if I just pass this in bills, because they always cite extenuating circumstances. There's always going to be a citation for that. We can't stop that, but that just is how it is. And it's not like voting in the right guy is going to fix that problem, because it's not. If I just vote this guy in, he'll get rid of all these billions of bills we probably have, at least thousands of bills we have, and fix everything. It's not going to work that way. It's probably never going to work that way. I can't imagine any system where voting in the right guy would fix anything. It doesn't work. We're on a steady decline. We're following trends. We're following appointees. We're not following voted in guys. If people being voted in actually changed anything, we wouldn't be allowed to vote anyway, like the old saying goes. So it's silly to think that voting somebody in is actually going to fix anything. But whatever. Hey, something that I thought was kind of funny is Fox right now is calling out Hollywood conservatives, which I don't have a problem with. If you want to be conservative in Hollywood, that's cool. You want to be liberal in Hollywood, that's cool too. I mean, I really don't care about your personal political leanings. Things are the way they are, and there's logic to follow. There are systems which work the same way, and that works, and that is how it is, no matter what your political stance. I'm friends with liberals. I'm friends with conservatives. I'm friends with a communist even, and I'm friends with hardcore anarchists and people who are constitutional, people who think the IRS should still exist. I really don't care about personal political leanings. But I think it's funny when people go nuts about, look at this conservative in Hollywood, like it's a rare thing. And then they point to people who are not really relevant right now, like Stacey Dash, great lady. I think she's really cool, but she's not going to be in a major Hollywood motion picture anytime soon, probably. So it seems kind of weird to be like, oh, look, Stacey Dash, she's conservative. Like, so, I mean, okay, cool. I mean, she's a cool lady, but I mean, she's not going to be being influential at some meeting somewhere. She's going to get on a podium. She's going to say, vote for Reagan, and people laugh at her. That's the extent of it, really. It's sad, but I mean, that is how it is. But whatever. Moving on. Amazon is opening its first actual real world bookstore in Seattle, which seems kind of contradictory. I mean, Amazon opening up a real physical bookstore seems kind of like, I don't know, seems kind of backward. That's like the opposite of what Amazon was supposed to be doing. Its first real-world bookshop in Seattle. Literary fans in Seattle will no longer need their MacBooks to procure the latest best-selling book. They just need to scroll down to the local Amazon bookstore. Hey! Today, the online retailer is opening its flagship titles is based on Amazon.com customer ratings, pre-orders, sales, popularity on Goodreads, and curator assessments. If you need further convincing, Amazon Books is also stocking review cards so as to ensure you know exactly what everyone else thought about your potential purchase, which is a cool idea. But again, think about Amazon. All right, Amazon was formed to be the anti-physical bookstore. I mean, it was initially formed as a bookstore online. That was the point. So, and I'm not against this decision by Amazon, but I mean, I think it's fine. But it seems kind of silly when you think about it. Like Amazon comes out, 1994, Jeff Bezos, we are the anti-bookstore physicala, and we're going to come out with all these cool books that you can buy online and have them shipped anywhere in your house, revolutionizing how we bought things online. It was really great. Amazon's actually older than I am, by the way. Amazon was formed in 1994. I was born in 1995. So if you want to feel old, that's a great way to feel old. Amazon.com is actually older than I am. Ooh, you're old now. But anyway, Amazon is like the anti-physical bookstore. So it seems kind of odd that Amazon's opening up a physical bookstore. It's like going back to your roots, I guess. I don't know. We see that a lot too, where companies will form themselves as like, I am the anti-business machine corporation. And then they get into enterprise big time. Like, what are you doing? Okay, think about Apple. Think different was a slogan. I think it might still be. And Apple was like the anti-IBM, basically. We're not going to bother with that Intel 8088 architecture. We're going to do our own thing. We're not going to use regular DOS. We're going to use Apple DOS. We're going to have VisiCalc. We're going to have a GUI. We're going to do all this cool stuff. And then later on, present day, we're the anti-business operation, whatever. So Amazon, I don't know if Google still holds to the don't be evil, but whatevs. Amazon stresses that the in-store price of books will be the same as what you'd find online, which is significant because I know a lot of people actually who, and I think this is very mean-spirited, but I know a lot of people who actually go to a physical bookstore, scan the book with Amazon and buy it on Amazon and leave. I think that's really mean. I mean, I know why people do it. I think it's really mean, but hey, do what you want. I wouldn't do that personally. So if you see me walk into your bookstore, chances are I'm going to actually buy the book that I see that I want at your bookstore, not on Amazon. Heaven knows, though, I buy a heck of a lot of books on Amazon. Amazon stresses that the in-store price of books will be the same as what you would find online. Amazon's rather disastrous foray into the Android smartphone industry was pretty terrible. There's no mention of the Fire phone in its press release, saying that it will sell the Kindle and the Fire tablet series. They don't mention the Fire phone because that was crappy and no one wanted it. I don't know anyone who bought an Amazon Fire phone, by the way. If you bought one, please send me a tweet. I want to know what it looks like because I haven't actually seen one in action. Come down to this. You can get us Hot News Talk Radio on Twitter. Just tweet at us. I'd love to see it. This is AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio. Clutch with Keon Rose is coming up next. He talks about sports in a way which is actually tolerable, unlike most sports shows where they totally lose me. Keon doesn't, and I think that's great. His show is Clutch with Keon Rose right here on Hot News Talk Radio AM 1240, and he's always here at hotnewstalkradio.com.
This is a mob mode. This is the mob mode.